Guys, I'm here live today with lender extraordinaire Nate Jomaa, and we're going to talk about whether or not there is a right time to buy or sell.
You better get fired up.
My man, what's going on?
What's happening?
Just living the dream, man. We're painting my office right now, so I'm actually sitting in my bedroom, and this has kind of been the office for the last 2 days. But luckily, we should be done today, and I'll be able to get back in there. But until then, it looks like I live in a dark closet, which, you know, maybe I do. Who knows? My wife's really in charge, so sometimes that's where I stay.
I heard.
All right, so today we're going to talk about, is there a right time to buy or sell? And honestly, let's forget the selling part. Let's talk about the buying part, because we've got Nate in here. And, you know, I can look at it from a market standpoint when it comes to prices. One of the big reasons I love having Nate in here today is because he looks at it from probably the only other large point, which is rates, right? What are rates going to do? He's getting that question every single day. I'm getting that question every day. What are prices going to do? That's another big question. So I'd love to hear from you, Nate. If I'm a buyer and I come in and I say either, hey, rates are too high, prices are too high, I'm thinking about waiting, I want to time the market, what kind of conversation are you having with that buyer to impart some wisdom on them from shared experiences that you've had?
Sure. Yes. So let's start with the comment you made. Rates are too high. I always say, compared to what? Like, compared to what are rates really high right now? Compared to a couple of years ago? Yeah, they are higher. Compared to 7 years ago? Not really. They're pretty good. So it really just depends on your perspective. So if somebody is of the opinion that rates are too high right now, I say you're right. Rates are a little bit higher than they were before. Home values are also a little bit higher now than they were before. So if rates are higher now and home values are higher now, assuming that rates don't move, worst case scenario, you're going to buy in 6 months or 12 months, you're going to spend more for the house for the same rate that you have today. Worst case scenario for me. Worst case scenario for you is that rates go down and you didn't take advantage of buying now, because you're going to now be one of many buyers that are out looking at these home prices that are creeping up, that are going to be probably selling for even more 6-7 months now, because all these other buyers came in. So now, instead of you maybe buying now where rates are higher, buying now where home values are more reasonable, you're going to be buying in 6 months where home values cost more and rates are lower, but you're going to be one of many bidding on that house. You're going to spend even more for the house. So any rate savings that you think you're getting waiting are going to be completely wiped away, and then some, by waiting for home values or waiting for rates to come down while home values are creeping up.
Yeah, I love what you say, and I'll say a couple things about it. Number one, I think when you're listening to a lender or a realtor and we say things like this, it's really easy, especially if you don't have a great relationship with us, to think, well, that's a sales pitch. I would recommend finding a realtor, a lender, anybody who you trust or don't trust. I guess with the exercise, it really wouldn't matter. In running the actual numbers, what if I were to buy? And what if rates came down? What if I were to buy and rates went up? What if I were to buy and rates stayed the same? And the same with prices. What would happen? What would it look like versus whatever my plan B is? And for most people, plan B is renting, right? And if you're to compare those two and you increase rent the way you should every year on average, and you increase your taxes on the purchase side every year like you should, and the insurance like you should, you'll see in just about every single situation, because of both the appreciation in the prices and because of the equity you're building by paying down your mortgage, it's about a 2 to 3 year break-even point where it breaks even on renting versus owning. And everything after 2-3 years, it almost always makes sense to buy, right? So I've got the chart up right now. Can you see it, Nate?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is historic mortgage rates over the last, since 1970. What's that, 54 years? So a pretty good chunk of time right here. And you can see where we're at right now is about where we were at in 2008. Okay, so we have been, luckily, and I'm in this boat as well, thank God, we've been spoiled with phenomenal rates. But the 50 That's not 50 years. The what? Oh wait, 38 years prior to that, and this only goes back 54 years. Rates were at that number or higher almost the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a buyer, I don't want to say that, and I don't want you to think that I think, well, obviously, we are at average or below average rates, you should buy. Just because we're at average or below average rates does not mean you should buy. You should still run the numbers, right? However, I think a lot of people think rates are really high, they're bound to come down. If you think rates are high and that is the cause of why rates are going to come down, I would argue they're kind of middle of the road right now, maybe even a hair low, right? So I wanted you to see a visual of that so you can see what rates have typically done over time. Now, does that mean rates are going to go up? Does that mean, rates are going to go down? It doesn't really mean anything.
Right.
I want you to have perspective on what normal rates look like over the last 54 years, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
I think that that's critically important. I've brought this up before, Nate. If you purchase a home, and I don't know if I like the phrase date the rate, marry the house, right? And it kind of implies go get the house that you want at today's prices because prices are almost assuredly only going to go up. But it implies rates will come down. So you're just dating the rate and you can change the rate. You can refinance your mortgage if rates go down. That's half true, right? In half of the times when rates come down, which maybe they will, maybe they won't, right?
Yeah.
I would argue it doesn't matter if you're dating the rate or marrying the rate, right? The fact of the matter is it almost always makes financial sense to purchase in every single scenario, and I'm happy to sit down with you and run those. Nate is happy to do that. And if rates go down, yes, you can go and you can refi. What will you be out? Nate's going to charge you a few $1,000s in refi fees, and you're going to get the same rate that you wished you would have waited for, right? You'd be out a few $1,000s for waiting. If rates go up, which in that graph I just showed you, there's just about equal amounts odds that it's going to go up, that they're going to go down. You're going to wish you had purchased as early as possible. Mm-hmm. So really your risk, in my opinion, compared to the overall value of a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 home is incredibly low compared to the risk of rates going up along with prices. And now you're in an even bigger hole trying to do so, right? Yeah. If you're thinking I'm pushing hard, I am pushing hard, man. I'm not a very salesy guy, but when it comes to my community, my friends, my family, anybody listening to this, and you rent, yes, I am pushing you to get out of that situation and into a purchased home, unless you're going to rent for 2 to 3 years and then you're going to move to Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't even know if Charlotte's in North Carolina. You're going to move to North Carolina. Then I would say rent. But other than that rare situation, it makes sense to buy. So
sure.
Let me get off my soapbox now, Nate. What other thoughts do you have on this topic?
I have a question for you that might help put something in perspective for those that are listening or watching later. Sure. If I'm going to rent a house, in your professional experience, how much would I need to make to rent a house, for example, for $3,000 a month? Would I need to make $9,000? That's what I hear.
Yeah. So with minor exception, and I'll talk about that in a second, you're going to need 3 times whatever the rent is. That's what every management company out there is asking for, right? So if you're looking in your example, which is a pretty typical example, at a $3,000 a month, they're going to want to see that you are netting $9,000 a month, right? So 9,000 times 12 is what, 108? So you're going to make $108,000 to get that. Are there people out there like Joe Rosen, the guy who owns one rental, who isn't going to hold you to that standard? Sure. But in my estimation, I would say that's probably 10 to 15% of rentals or less. And a lot of times those rentals are the ones that most people have the most challenges with because they're not professionally managed.
Sure.
So yeah, you're spot on 3 times.
Okay. So 3 times the rent would mean that 1 month of rent is 33% of my income, right?
Yep.
Okay. So what would it cost me if the rent was $3,000 a month to move in? Would it be first, last, and security?
Yeah, first, last, security, and it's almost always a hair more than 3 times because you're going to have first, last, and deposit. Plus, there's usually going to be an application fee or a background check or added money for having pets or whatever it is, but it's usually a little over 300%.
Okay, so that would be a 6%. Sorry, that would be a 3% down payment and a 33% DTI. Guess what? If you can afford that, you can buy a house.
Yeah, that exactly. I've had so many people who come to me with 8, 9, 10 grand and they want to rent. And I'm like, dude, we could go buy a house. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Now I will say this. A lot of people are going to tell you, if you go on Google and you look up how much you need to buy a house, they're going to say, hey, on an FHA loan, you need 3.5 down and you're going to need at least 3.5, 4% in closing costs. So you need 7.5% down. That is true in that one scenario. But Nate is talking about, I assume, a 3% down conventional, which means you have not owned a home, a primary residence in the last 36 months. Is that right?
36 months.
Yep, 36 months. So you can get a 3% down conventional. This is assuming you've never been in the military. If you have, it gets even sweeter. Yep. I've got a military couple right now. They're going to buy a home and it's going to be 0% down, right?
Beautiful.
So how do you get in for 3% down? Like Nate is saying, you ask for the seller to pay your closing costs. Will every seller do that? No. But 2, 3, 4 years ago, it was impossible. Nobody did that.
Right.
Now, a lot of people are bending on that. Would you, let's just say the home price is 300 grand. Would you be able to come in at 300 grand, ask for 3% and closing costs to be paid for, which is 9 grand? They net, the seller nets 291 and you get the home. Sure. Will everybody do that? No. Could you come in at 309 and ask for that $9,000 back and now they're netting their 300? Absolutely. Are there challenges with it? It has to appraise, but in all honesty, the difference between a $300,000 home and a 309 really isn't that drastic, and I do not see those now. I've had 13 short appraisals since I've been in Florida on all the properties that we've sold, and all but one of them have been over $500,000. So if you're in that first-time homebuyer bracket, that 300 to 400 grand, I'm not saying it won't happen, but it's incredibly rare, right? So asking for closing costs is not that big of a deal. And to Nate's point, you've already got what you need. Right? You're already there. So good point, Nate.
Yeah. So I'm not suggesting that everybody say, I'm not going to rent, I'm going to buy, because it may not be the right time or even the right idea for you to buy. But I would say overwhelmingly or overarchingly, most people that are renting right now could probably buy a home. Most.
I had put a Facebook post up the other day with some data, and I want to see if I can find it here. I think I had 2 of them. Man, I was on a data drive here. Holy smokes.
I like it. I'm a number geek like you, Joe. I get it. I love it.
Well, like I said, man, I feel like it's my job as a guy in the community, and this is what I'm good at, to really make sure that people are educated. Whether or not they do the thing is up to them, but I want to make sure you're educated, right? So, okay. Here's a post, and I'd like to just show this post here quick. Facebook share. Okay, so that's not the post I wanted. Here's the post I wanted. Okay, so you got 2 choices, right? The first one is share your frustration in increased housing prices, which is true. If you're a buyer and you're trying to get in, you're tight on numbers, it's frustrating. And they've gone from an average of $256,996 5 years ago. This is nationwide, to $421,700 today. And I'll tell you, in Port St. Lucie, the median price point is right around $420,000. So this is pretty accurate to our area here. And you can express that frustration, and it'll create an emotional sense of relief for about 4 minutes. And I think I'm being nice with the 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Choice B is you can look at these patterns. You can look at the data. You can look at the numbers. You can do your research, and you can see the consistency in rising prices in everything, not just homes, over the decades, not just the last couple years. And you can purchase today, and I'll talk about what that means here in a second, right? And where I think we've kind of changed our mindset over the last 10, 20 years. And your average priced home, which we said was $421,700, and maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, whatever it is you're comfortable with, but whatever purchase price it is, right? It'll increase over the average pace over the last 5 years, which I was surprised to find was 5.34%. I guessed it was going to be around 3 or 4%. So that surprised me. That home at $421,700 in 10 years will be worth $709,500. So if you're 24 years old and you buy at age 34, you will have a $709,500 home. And you would owe roughly, and this, I'm a realtor, right? So take Nate's word, I can't even say it, Nate's word for it. But I'm guessing you're going to be right around that 347,962. Let's just say 348 on that date. That's what you're going to owe on that 421 property you'd purchased 10 years ago. You're going to have a hair over $360,000 in additional wealth. To me, that is monstrous.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the difference. That's when I meet some 30-year-olds, and some of them have 300 grand in the bank, and some of them are living paycheck to paycheck. Not always, but I would say there's one or two things, or maybe two or two things that happened. Sometimes there was an inheritance, but the overwhelming majority of the time when somebody's got that kind of money in the bank and they're in their 20s or 30s, it's because they purchased real estate early.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were able to sell it, and now they got this chunk of money.
Yeah, you're right.
So,
you're right.
Here's another thing I'd like to discuss. Somebody pointed this out. It wasn't something Joe Rosen came up with. And I thought, I think that's true, but is this old man Rosen on his rocking chair yelling at kids to get off my grass that's saying this? Or is this really true? So I'm going to tell you my thought, and I'd like to hear your opinion on it.
Sure.
I think today, when I talk to a typical, 25 to 30-year-old couple, and they're wanting to purchase their first home, when they come to me, they'll say, Joe, I want new construction, and we're going to need 4 bedrooms, and it's got to have at least 1,800 square feet, and I want it to be in a nice community. Well, those things right there, you're looking at 375 to 400 starting in this area. And we've got a little bit higher taxes, and you might be in an HOA with that, so now you got an HOA payment. When I think back to, I say my generation like I'm that old. I'm 42 years old, but I feel like I'm an old man talking about this. When I think back to when I was, 18 to 25 looking at buying my first home, I wasn't even considering new construction. I was looking at homes, and you're not going to see this in Port St. Lucie because it's such a young city, but I was looking at homes built in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and nothing was updated.
No.
And there was nothing structurally wrong with the home, but it had nasty old orange shag carpet, and it had wallpaper that was peeling at the corners, and the roof was 9 years old. And, if you banged on the house at all, the windows shook because they were 32 years old. And I didn't even think that I deserved more. I thought, I'm a first-time home buyer. I'm a kid. This is the beginning of the wealth process. This is what a first-time home buyer buys. Now, at that time, I remember the average sales price in St. Cloud at that time was about 170, 175. Right? This is when I was in my early 20s and I started real estate. And the homes that I was looking at were kind of in that 100 to 120 range. And that was blowing my mind. And the home I actually bought was $104,000 compared to 170. Now, there are homes on the market right now in the high 2s, low 3s that most people could afford. But when they look at it, they're like, ugh, this is dated. It's small. It's not in the perfect neighborhood. I don't want it. And I start to question, here's where my question is it really, it is tougher. I don't want to take away from rising prices and rising rates, but is it really the American dream of owning a home is fleeting? Or is it the expectations of everybody with everything, to including housing, has gotten higher, even if they haven't gotten to the point where they've necessarily, in my opinion, earned it yet? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to sound like the old man sitting on the rocking chair with you at out there on the porch right now, because my thought on that is exactly the same as yours.
Yeah,
we're in a generation now where everybody wants instant gratification, so they want their perfect home right now. Facebook, social media, any DoorDash, you can get food just like this right now. So yeah, I agree with you. In my mind, I would think that and I'm, in my 40s as well, Joe. So we're very
old man Nate.
In my mind, back when I was in my 20s, I wasn't looking at the perfect house. I was saying, I need to find something that is mine, that I can make mine. And then the same thought process you just shared with us, 10 years from now, I'm going to sell this thing and I'm going to have more money, and I'm going to be able to buy the nicer house, and I'm going to be able to pay off some debt and put some money in my pocket.
Yep.
The generation today, I think, is looking for that instant gratification. They're trying to skip the phase where you have to buy the less attractive houses that maybe have outdated things.
Yeah.
Like, to your point, like, these houses aren't dilapidated and falling apart. They just have older carpet or older kitchens or older bathrooms or what have you. They're nice houses, but they're outdated. Yeah, but I can afford this nice house that's outdated today, right?
Yeah. I think I've owned 3 homestead properties in my life, right? Forget the investment properties. And the first one I bought was that one for, I think it was 104, 105, and it was a duplex. And part of the reason I bought it was even I was concerned about, can I afford 104, 105? And so I got the duplex, which meant I got the income from the backside, right?
Sure.
So I don't remember what my mortgage payment was, but what I was actually paying out of pocket was probably $100, $200 a month, plus my utility bills, because everything was covered by the income coming from the backside.
Sure.
Now, I feel like if you talk to a lot of people who are in their 20s today and you mention that, they're like, I'm not going to live by somebody else. I'm not going to live in a multiplex. That's crazy. And I didn't even think of that. I just thought, I'm here to build some cash. I'm here to build some wealth. And I'm young and I'm single and I don't have kids. It's time to live the sucky life, which in all honesty, you know, it's not that sucky. Anything you've ever done that sucks. I mean, I've done the Army. I've done Afghanistan. I've done living in a $104,000 home. It sucks for 2 weeks and then it just becomes your new norm. And that might sound like a sad story, but I just feel like so many people's high expectations holds them back from being successful or wealthy. Looking at the second home that I purchased, we purchased it for 170 in Washington. This was when I was in the Army, and it was not updated. It was not large. I want to say it was 1,400 square feet. It was 3 bedrooms all next to each other. And we had a 2-year-old and a baby on the way. And I thought, holy smokes, that's going to be a loud little corner of the house. And the garage was converted into our living room. So you had a concrete step down into our living room. And there was an aquarium in the wall, which we never filled or used. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And there were super cute things about it. I mean, I'm only telling you the negatives about it. But we bought that home for 170, and I sold it 4 years later for $300,000. And that's what gave me the cash to be able to buy the home that I'm currently in. And now we're in a home that's worth over $500,000. And a lot of people would look at that and say, must be nice. And I'm thinking, you don't see the cash that I pulled out of the first home to put into the second home.
Right.
And then I had to wait 4 years living with all that crap I just told you about, and then pull the cash out of that to be able to afford this house. So it is nice, but it's nice because I went through those stages and I did my time. And now I've earned the home that everybody kind of wants right off the bat. So
I was just going to say that. Yeah, it is nice, but that's because you put in the time, right? You have that time. You have that tenure. You had to make the sacrifices to get there. So when you make the sacrifices and you let time pass, you do get really nice things.
Yes.
But you have to work for it.
Yeah. Now, last thing I'll say, and I'd like to hear, your point on this if you've got anything to add. The question of the video is there a better time to sell, or when is the best time to not sell, to buy or not? And I would say this. Prices almost unanimously have gone up every single year. And when they go down, they don't stay down long. And with the exception of 2008, they rarely go down enough to where you'd wished you'd waited, right? Exactly. Even if prices go down 2 or 3% this year, which when they drop, that's usually what they drop, it's not going to make up for all the lost mortgage pay down that you would have had that year building up your equity in the home. Exactly. You need a 10, 20, 30% drop for it to make sense. And the odds of that happening, if you look at the last 100 years and you look at how many of those years had, say, a 10% drop or more, it's in the single digits. It is incredibly rare. And when it does that, it comes back pretty quickly.
Exactly.
So you have to time it perfectly. And if you're a Warren Buffett fan like I am, he'll tell you, 96%, I think, of money managers get beat by the S&P 500 index fund, which is run by, like, there's no manager at the top making great decisions. They're just saying, what are the biggest 500 companies? Boom. That's what we're investing in, right? 96% of money managers over a 10-year span get beat by them, which says if the pros who are putting 60, 70, 80 hours in a week can't time the market, why the hell would I think I can? And I would say the same thing with the housing. You have to time it so perfectly. You can't just say, I'm going to wait until it goes down. You have to know when it hits the bottom. And I'm telling you, on the way down, everybody's going to say, I'm going to keep waiting. I'm going to keep waiting. I'm going to keep waiting.
Right.
By the time the '08 folks said, I'm going to get back in, it had already come up 5, 10, 15 points. And they missed that trough that they were looking for.
Exactly.
So I don't say this to be negative or to push you. Well, I do want to push you to buy. I think everybody should get out of renting. So if this is what does it, yes, buy. But I'm not saying it as a pitch. I'm saying it because the odds of you as a human being, and I'm in real estate, and even I have no idea what's going to happen with the market. And if it plummets 20% tomorrow, I don't know if it's going to stay that way for a year or 5 years or come back up in the next 3 months. Who the hell knows?
Right.
I'm certainly not going to bet my future wealth on it.
Exactly. I
know that buying is a winning ticket over a 5, 10-year span 99% of the time. Why wouldn't I want that winning ticket?
Exactly.
So, I'll open it up to you, and you can finish this out. Do you think there is some metric or something or some triggering event that would make it a great time to buy over another?
I'll take my sales hat off and throw it as far away as I can and just talk numbers, because numbers aren't sales. Numbers are facts, right? You can't argue the numbers. When you make a mortgage payment, some of that payment, and we've talked about this, goes toward your interest. But the other part of that payment, you're taking from your right hand and putting in your left hand, and you're paying down what you owe on the house. And so you do that for 12 months, you do that for 24 months, you do that for 36 months. Over the course of that 36-month period of time, you've made 36 payments, and every one of those payments has taken the principal, the amount that you owe, down incrementally every single month. Over that same span of time, Joe, you are getting, to your point, appreciation in that house. So you're saving money every single month because you're putting that money back into, let's call it a reserve account. That's the equity in your house that you can't touch, but you're also gaining appreciation every single month.
Yeah.
And so over that period of time, again, 36 months, you're paying down your mortgage, your house is appreciating, you're building up this bank account that is the equity in your house.
Yeah.
So there's never a bad time to start investing in yourself. To your point, there has been one instance where home values went down quite a bit and they slowly recovered. One time, and what is it, a 50-year window did we look at, or is it 100 years?
Well, I want to say the last time that happened, and I'm making this up, I don't have data behind this, but from memory, it was the 1920s when we saw that drastic.
Exactly. Thank you. So it's been about a 100-year window. There was one instance in 2008 where stuff got real weird. So you have a 1 in 99 chance of that happening again. Like you're more likely to have some random person drive their car into your house than to lose equity like that, right?
Spot on.
Yeah, so,
spot on, man.
I mean, I'm glad you pulled this up because that shows exactly what I'm talking about. Every single month, your principal balance on that goes down further and further and further.
Yeah, so what we've got here, you can see in the top left, I just made up a loan amount of $350,000. It's over 30 years. It's at 7.5% interest. These are all pretty normal first-time home buyer calculations. Look at this little chart down here, and we're only looking at 13 years. It goes beyond, but we're only looking at 13 years. Oh, let's see if I can get it back up. Okay, now we're looking at 16. But you can see this middle column right here is how much you're paying down on that $350,000 loan every single year. Mm-hmm. So in year one, you're paying $3,200 down. So that means if prices drop roughly 1%, or we'll say $3,226 exactly on a $350,000 home, you're still breaking even.
Yeah.
right? Because you lost out on all of that principal pay down. The next year it's 34.76. The next year it's 37.46. And that number goes up, 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 up. And you can see it goes up pretty quick. By year 10, you're paying off $6,300 a year.
Yeah.
So I personally love getting my mortgage statement every single month. And what I forget what that number is, but it's $600, $700, $800 I'm paying down every single month on my mortgage. And it feels awesome. It feels awesome. So you can see after 10 years on that $350,000 home, you owe $303,000. So you've already made almost $50,000 in equity. And that's assuming the market hasn't gone up at all, which I've never seen a 10-year period where it does that.
Right. Exactly.
So if you're getting that increase of 5.34% every single year for 10 years, plus you got the built-in $46,000, $47,000 of equity, you can see where these monster checks for these, I'll call them kids, are coming into play, right? These guys are 30, 35 years old, and they're getting these huge checks.
Yeah.
It's not a secret. It's math.
Exactly. It's math. This isn't a sales pitch at all. It's just math.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And I will say this. It's scary. People will say, well, if I rent, I don't have to pay insurance. I don't have to pay taxes. I don't have to worry about the HOA due. That's not true, because I'll tell you, when I'm a landlord, if my mortgage is $1,800 and my taxes are going to cost me $600 a month, that's $2,400, and my HOA fee is $200, that's $2,600, and my insurance is $300 a month, that's $2,900. I'm going to charge you $3,000, $3,100, $3,200, somewhere in there. And yes, you don't have to pay all those things. I'm paying them, but you're paying me to pay them, and I'm making a profit, and you're paying down my mortgage, none of which you get to take advantage of when you eventually leave that rental.
Exactly.
So you're paying the doggone insurance and taxes and HOA. You're paying it all. Yeah. You're just paying it through me because I'm smart enough to go buy an investment home and then rent it out to you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so I could not have said that any better, Joe. That's exactly correct. You're not avoiding those things. You're just paying a premium on all of them because your landlord is having you pay that regardless. Plus, there's a bit of a markup because he wants to make some money, right?
Yeah. So Nate, I'm a buyer. I think I'm going to buy. I'm in that $300,000 to $400,000 range, but I'm really nervous. I really want to rent, but I watched this video and I'm thinking, makes a lot of sense. If I call you up, if I send you a Facebook DM, how much time do I need to invest with you to know if I can purchase or not?
So we'll start it with a quick conversation, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, just so that I can ask some information and figure out what it looks like. If that conversation goes well, then I will ask you to provide me with a little bit more information online and show me evidence of income, assets. We'll look at credit together. So your total time investment, probably an hour. And we'll know exactly what you can do, exactly how much you can get approved for. And then you can connect with Joe and say, hey, Joe, Nate got me a pre-approval for this much money. What is out there in this price range? And Joe's going to be able to give you, any number of houses that fit that box for you.
And guys, we're both nerds, if you can't tell. So if you pick a price point and we can estimate taxes and insurance and all that stuff, we can run this 10-year scenario on, hey, what if you were to rent? What if you were to purchase and then sell in 10 years? What would that look like? What are the odds that it's a mistake, right? And we can look at historic numbers, all that stuff. I love that stuff. Nate loves that stuff. So if we can talk one person into getting out of a doggone rental, you can use a different lender, a different realtor. I don't care. Just buy a doggone house and get out of those rentals. So
I agree.
Nate, as always, I appreciate you, man. Preaching to the masses, the good word here of buying real estate and getting some money in that wealth jar. And I hope you have a phenomenal weekend, my friend. Thank you.
You as well. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.